جمال الوجود بذكر الإله.
So inshallah, we're going to hear from Maulana Ibrahim Bam on the Islamic view on contemporary education. So Maulana is the Secretary General of Jamiyat al-Ulama South Africa and the board chair of Johannesburg Muslim School, and he is a very prominent figure in the South African community. And if any of you have been to South Africa, you will know that mashallah, the South African community is leaps and bounds ahead in many things, mashallah. Very, very well established community with amazing schools, amazing work, amazing institutes happening, and Maulana Ibrahim is one of the founders of many of those things that are happening. So inshallah we will benefit from him.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمد ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنما يخشى الله من عباده العلماء. وقال تعالى قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون. صدق الله العظيم. Respected ulama, scholars, teachers, muallims, muallimas, brothers and sisters, we begin by praising Almighty Allah, sending salutations upon our beloved Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we hope inshallah that this coming together of ours, this session would be one of benefit to both myself and yourself inshallah al-Aziz. I have opted to sit because of my arthritis, so inshallah just excuse me with regard to it. Perhaps it would have been better if I would have taken, but I will inshallah from time to time alternate between sitting and standing. The first point, and I think why have I chosen this topic, the Islamic view on contemporary education? Because many a times Muslim schools are schools in which we do, Quran and Hadith, and also we have what is called contemporary studies. Now there's always, so sometimes people have described it as secular knowledge. Basically, it's something that I find very inappropriate, because the word secular comes from the Latin word secularos, something like that. And what it means is something that I don't believe, something that is beyond the unseen, something that I can't see. I don't believe in what I cannot see, something of that sort. And this is something that goes against the Islamic view. And sometimes people have used the word contemporary, although it is something that has always been in existence. Sometimes the people use the word to differentiate between the Quran and Hadith and maths, science, etc. They use the definition divine knowledge and acquired knowledge. So sometimes acquired knowledge, we know, for example, 2 plus 2 equals to 4 is something that is acquired by either experience or either by common sense. So many other aspects with regard to medicine in particular is acquired by experience. But be as it may, I'm just going very briefly into the definition, just to give us some understanding. By contemporary, we mean sciences like maths, geography, history, accounting, etc. Now the first thing that I have used, the first slide, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said, "Talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli Muslim." That the acquiring of knowledge is compulsory upon each and every Muslim. Now when you look at this hadith, I think it's important for us just to look at this, that if ever anyone says an ignorant Muslim, it's a misnomer. It's not supposed to exist in our dictionary. That when Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Islam has made knowledge not into means that no Muslim is supposed to be without knowledge, because it is compulsory. Yes, the one aspect that does come to play is what is compulsory. Is it compulsory for me to become a PhD in chemical engineering, for example, just to give a far-fetched example? Well, obviously no. So what is compulsory? So ulama have written that with every compulsion in our religion becomes a commensurate compulsory, then it is compulsory for each and everyone to know how to perform salat. If Hajj is compulsory, and if you are going for Hajj, it is compulsory for you to know at least the basic aspects of Hajj. Now obviously there are going to be sometimes when you are in Hajj, certain issues arise, certain complications arise, certain complexities arise, then by all means you can ask an alim. But when you are going for Hajj, it is compulsory for you to know every aspect of the farais of Hajj. If you are starting a business, it is compulsory for you to know the basic halal and haram with regard to business. Therefore it is said historically that Umar radiallahu ta'ala used to go into the marketplaces in Medina to inquire from people with regard to the masail of business. Do you know this? You are in the marketplaces. And only those who are allowed who knew the basic masail with regard to it. So we look at that as an example with regard to what is faraz. And I think that would be now, in fact this morning also, Professor Abdullah made mention with regard to the aspect of we need to be careful with regard to using the word Islamicizing contemporary knowledge, because 2 plus 2, as I said, is 4. It's not necessarily haram. Yes, it will depend upon what you do with that neutral knowledge. So when he asked the question, someone said neutral, and immediately he said, yes, that's exactly what it is. It's neutral. It now depends upon what you are going to do with it. Are you going to use it correctly, or are you going to use it incorrectly? So I think that is this. And of course in Islam we know there is no dichotomy between the spiritual and the mundane and the year after. Right? Ye khaki apne fitrat mein na noori hai na nari. Allama Iqbal has made mention with regard to it that this human by his very nature is not intrinsically evil or intrinsically an angel. So what is made mention in this is that there is no dichotomy. A person can do worldly efforts, worldly deeds, mundane activities with the correct intention, and it can become deen. And we all know that, right? I don't want to go into a much technical detail, but of that the ulama have made mention that there is 2 types of ibadat: the direct ibadat and the indirect ibadat. The direct ibadat is that has been, and Mufti Taqi has made mention with regard to it, direct ibadat means that ibadat which is done directly with the command of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Aqimus salah wa atu zakat. Perform salat, establish salat, and give zakat. Now that's a direct ibadat, a direct command of Almighty Allah. There is no direct command that you must perform, become a doctor or do some mundane activities. However, if the mundane activity is done with the correct intention and it is done with the correct methodology, it can become deen. In this way, in reality, we are turning dust into gold, just with proper methodology and with intention. And that is why Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had said, Talabul halal faridatun ba'd al-farida. And the acquiring of halal rizq is a religious obligation after the other religious obligation, or the major religious obligation, or the religious obligation that is known. And sometimes you get such great reward that an honest trader will be in the company of the Anbiya, the Siddiqeen, and the Shuhada on the day of Qiyamah. Right? So there is no dichotomy. The value of empirical knowledge and scientific inquiry as a means to appreciate spiritual truth, bridging the spiritual and secular realms. So this is something where even our mundane activities can become deen. But we also have to be careful that a person goes out to acquire rizq. Is he doing it because it is a religious obligation? Or is he doing it because I'm part of the rat race? And that is the great challenge of challenging our intention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us in the Quran, يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. There are people who know much about the apparent aspects of this dunya. And this is the Western materialistic society. They have achieved technology, they have done many great feats with regard to technology, etc. But وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. But they are completely unaware and ignorant with regard to akhirat. Now what is the use of such type of knowledge which does not bring you closer towards Almighty Allah? Some ulama, I heard one, an alim saying that sometimes you ask a person who is a PhD in the highest form of knowledge, he's got his masters, etc., and you ask him, who has created the universe? Do you believe in the creator of the universe? And he says, I'm an agnostic. I'm not very sure with regard to it. I got doubts with regard to it. I can be this side or I can be that side. And he says that, and you ask a 5-year-old Muslim child, who created the universe? He says, Allah. And you ask, who is the better between the two? One is an informed illiterate, and one who's got knowledge. So, information does not translate into knowledge. So sometimes you can have information, but it is not knowledge. And Allah Ta'ala in the Holy Quran, in the 22nd Supara and 22nd Juz, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. You will never get a definition of ilm the way it is in this verse. The learned are those who fear Allah. Ulama are those who fear Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. You won't get a better definition with regard to knowledge. So anyway, this is just something. And Allah Ta'ala says, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Those who know are not equal to those who do not know. Those who have knowledge, they have an added advantage to those who do not have that knowledge. This highlights the superior status of those who pursue knowledge without separating it into sacred or secular categories. Now, this verse is a very interesting verse. While it was revealed for a specific context, I will relate why it is relevant to our topic. So Allah Ta'ala says, it is not proper for believers to go into battle all at once. It's not proper for everyone to go out in qital and jihad. And we know that jihad is one aspect of Islam, right, with the proper conditions. So Allah Ta'ala says it is not proper for everyone to go out in jihad. Why? فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ. There should be a group from amongst the believers. فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ, a group, لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, who gain insight and in-depth knowledge of deen. لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ وَلِيُنذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ. That they can warn the people when they return back to their community, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ, that they turn towards Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Now that is the aspect that not everyone is supposed to go into jihad at once. There should be a group of people who remain consistent, steadfast, pursuing Islamic knowledge. Because without it, people would not know the masail of deen, people would not be motivated, will not be inspired. There will be ulama and those who are learned will inspire people. The way Allah Ta'ala says, وَلِيُنذِرُوا قَوْمَهُمْ, they will warn the people when they return back to them. So that is the context of the verse. But it also gives us another important lesson. So Allah Ta'ala says, a group لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ will gain in-depth knowledge of deen. So what does it tell us? Not everyone is going to be a mufti. Right? Not everyone is going to be a mufti. Not everyone is going to gain in-depth knowledge. There should be a group that will be engaged in other pursuits which will be beneficial for the Muslim Ummah, as I will go on to understand. So this verse I have put it out for us to understand. The context is something, but also within that we learn something very important, that not everyone is going to be an alim. Obviously from this it does tell you that it is farz kifaya for a community to have an alim to refer to with regard to matters of deen. فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ. Farz kifaya. Right? Otherwise, a community would be blameworthy if they don't have someone that they can refer to with regard to matters pertaining to their spirituality. But of course, as I said, it does refer to that not everyone is going to be an alim. Allah Ta'ala says a group of people will be those who will be لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ. Now, this is a very interesting hadith, and every hadith is interesting. And again, while the hadith has got a particular context, what I want to do with regard to it is also make mention with regard to why I have put it in the slide and how does it relate to our topic. So one of the aspects with regard to it is, and before I go in, just with regard to the other slide, now, if for example there should be a group لِيَتَفَقَّهُ فِي الدِّينِ, what does the other branches of knowledge, which today many Muslims are sending their children to universities to become doctors, to become accountants, to become engineers, where does that fit in the scheme? And of course, Professor Abdullah also made mention with regard to it. It can be farz kifaya, it can be different things. And in this particular regard, I'm going to quote two ulama, because one of the motivation for this program was, and the motivation for this presentation, what do the ulama say with regard to contemporary knowledge? So Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi in his Ihya has written that there are two branches of knowledge. One is farz ayn, which I made mention under the slide, talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli muslim. And then he said, there are certain branches of knowledge which is indispensable for the welfare of mankind. And if you look at here, he writes katibbi wal hisab, like medicine and accounting. Katibbi wal hisab. This is in Ihya al-Ulum. Katibbi wal hisab. And like accounting and medicine. If the ummah is not engrossed and does not pursue that knowledge and don't get expertise in that knowledge, they are going to be prejudiced. They are going to be disadvantaged. See, each and everyone, by and large, especially Muslim women, would like to go to a Muslim doctor. And if we don't have that, what happens? We are prejudiced, we are disadvantaged. So Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi has made contemporary knowledge, which is indispensable for the welfare of mankind, farz kifaya. And this is something that we have to keep in mind. Farz kifaya. Today we have, you have different views, people coming up. You even have some learned people, or at least apparently learned, saying that it is haram to go to the school, haram to go to university. And we have all these type of things. But obviously we don't realize that if we adopt such a thing, then what happens to us? And I will go on to make mention with regard to it. So in this regard, no, this is Imam Ghazali's view. And he said anything that is indispensable for the welfare. Yes. Katibbi wal hisab, he gives it, ka means as, for example. So these are two examples. It can mean, one of the main thing I would say in today's time would be the defense arms. Look at how the Muslim community and the ummah, I'm not a politician and I can't be discussing these type of things. We have to do it with a certain degree of caution. But the ummah has become prejudiced because they don't have the means to protect themselves.
In the eyes of Allah, is alim and a doctor and lawyer, they are in the same level or they are in the...
Well, there is an aspect with regard to, let's put the Quran and Hadith. Wait, I'll give you an example.
Sacrificing, not going to madrasas or Deoband, but they are going to this. And they are serving the community.
Well, I made mention of it, if you have just maybe heard in the beginning stages, that there are two types of knowledge, divine, and there is whatever we call farz kifaya. Now, the Quran and Hadith will be superior. Everyone will say that it is superior. And the reason why it is superior, amongst other reasons, is, firstly, there is no evolving of Quran and Hadith. Right? Contemporary knowledge, by its very nature, is evolving. So we all know that 20, 30 years ago, doctors used to tell us that stay away from eating eggs because there's cholesterol. Now they tell you it's very beneficial. Right? So there is an evolving aspect with regard to knowledge. You can't bring that knowledge equivalent to that knowledge which never is altered. So interest is haram, is going to be haram in the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is going to be haram now. And all other knowledge, we're always going to acquire it within the framework which has been set up by Quran and Hadith. So all other knowledge, the framework is the Quran and Hadith. Yeah.
So, I think in the context of what you were just talking about, if acquiring worldly knowledge is done with the intention
Yes.
of helping the ummah,
Yes.
that includes nuclear
Yes.
technology, that includes
Definitely. Definitely.
Somebody is doing that with that intention,
He becomes rewarding.
then probably in this age and time, he may get a
100%.
than somebody who's
I mean, see, at the end of the day, one is you give a general ruling, the Quran and Hadith, because it comes from Allah Ta'ala is reward. But individually, a person can gain more rewards than an alim, depending upon his intention, sincerity, and the needs of the ummah. I'll give you an example. I'll just give you an example. Now, since things come in. During the time of partition, there was a great freedom scholar, a person who did a great amount of Maulana Hifzur Rahman Suharwi, right? Known to be a very great guy. So during the course of partition, he was in Delhi helping the people to move from India to Pakistan. And he spent a lot of time helping the people, putting them into the trains, etc. He made a lot of effort. And after 1-2 months, when everything became settled, he went to his Sheikh, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Raipuri Rahmatullah Alayhi. And he said, Sheikh, forgive me, the last 2 months, I have not been able to pursue my normal routine of zikr. He said, why? He said, I was helping the people who were in great stress, great distress. They were afraid of losing their life, and I helped them. And we all know the type of partition, what happened. No? So the Sheikh Abdul Qadir Raipuri Rahmatullah Alayhi told him, Hifzur Rahman, give me those last 2 months of your helping people, take my zikr. Whatever zikr I have, you take it. Whatever you help the people, give me that reward. So yes, sometimes on that particular matter, a person can come and do something for the sake of Allah Ta'ala, like for example the nuclear. Just to talk about it, Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sent 2 people to Jarash in Syria who did not take part in 1 or 2 major battles to learn the latest technology in military at that time. So the first time the caterpillar was used, Mufti Taqi Sahib has made mention of it, the first time the caterpillar was used was in the siege of Taif. Obviously, it was in the beginning stages of the caterpillar, but later on in medieval times, and whoever has seen the Kingdom of Heaven, how Salahuddin Ayyubi used the caterpillar, how he conquered Jerusalem. So yes, we believe in that. So in this one here, Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam passed by certain people grafting trees, right? And in the grafting, has made mention, Allah Ta'ala has created everything in pairs. So they were doing the grafting in a particular way of pairing trees and pairing the roots of trees. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it would be better if you do not do that because it doesn't bring any benefit. Whatever is going to happen, whatever the crops are going to yield, it is muqaddar min Allah. So they said, they didn't do it, they followed, and then Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came after a while and said, what happened to the crops? He said, it didn't yield what we expected. So Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used the word, Allahu a'lamu bi umuri dunyakum. You know much about your affairs. You are the experts in that. You know your affairs. Now, again, we have to be careful about it. And again, Mufti Taqi Usmani in his book, which is downloadable, which I just downloaded, and he said that authority of the Sunnah. We have to be careful. It doesn't mean that in the matters of dunya, you are not bound by the Sunnah or the commands of Allah. Right? It doesn't mean that. Right? But it does mean that, but why have I used it in this slide, in this context? Recently, a very famous scholar of ours from South Africa, Mufti Razaulak, he replied to those who said that the knowledge of maths, science, etc. is not part of ilm. He said, look at what Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Allahu a'lamu. You know, a'lamu bi umuri dunyakum. You know the ilm of your affairs. So he has referred to worldly knowledge as ilm. So those who say this is not ilm, this hadith is a refutation upon them. Right? So then, of course, I'm going to use one more slide with regard to a very famous, just to show you the aspect with regard to maths. Right? So here is a statement of Al-Hadiyya Al-Aliyya Alauddin ibn Abidin, the son of Allama Muhammad Amin ibn Abidin, the author of the very famous, or in fact the most famous, the source book of Hanafi fiqh. And his son has made mention of it. Know that the science of maths is among the science needed for many Sharia related matters, especially inheritance, zakat, blood money and bequest. For this reason they said about the science of maths that it is a quarter of knowledge, since the law of inheritance constitute half of knowledge. And of course, the matter of the determining the Qibla, etc., will require worldly knowledge for us to determine the Qibla and the many things. I was in Uzbekistan, so Alauddin Beg, Alauddin Beg was a very great scientist. They say he was way ahead of his time. In fact, he was so ahead of his time when he presented his findings with regard to Zawal and with regard to science, they regarded to be blasphemous. And people of his own family, they killed him because they found that his knowledge was what they regarded to be blasphemous. But in today's time, his findings are regarded to be part of the new scientific inquiries. So we can go in with regard to it. I think it's important. And just to give you an example, I'll just give you a personal example with regard to how these type of matters are become part of deen, and we can understand the Quran and Hadith when we do have in-depth knowledge of other matters, science, maths, etc. But before that, I'll just give you another fatwa on this particular regard. Is a fatwa of Mufti Razaulak. Is it permissible for Muslims to acquire worldly knowledge? In every aspect of my life, Muslims are in need for specialists, and specialists are sought. If Muslims do not participate in any worldly field, it will be left in the hands of non-Muslims, which could lead to many difficulties. Therefore, acquiring worldly knowledge and progressing is permissible and correct. In fact, if it is done with the intention of serving Islam, which is in response to your question, and proper observance of modesty and hijab, which must be ensured, and studying in girls' holy schools, it is preferable and safer from fitna and temptation. Now, just to go back to a personal example with regard to what I said. Many years ago, in 1984, that is quite some, I think 30, 40 years ago, I went to the Johannesburg City Hall, and there was a debate between a person by the name of Gary Miller. And Gary Miller was at that time debating the great legendary Ahmad Didat, right? And they were speaking about the Quran. Whereas the Quran is the word of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not. That was the purpose. So during the course of him, relating things, he spoke one or two things about the beauty of the Quran. Although the debate was this, but he spoke about one too. I still remember a Christian woman standing up from the audience and said, "We expected you to champion the cause of Christianity, and here you are speaking with regard to the beauty of the Quran." And he said, "Well, I have to be intellectually honest." And then he made mention with regard to it, one or two things. And then several years after that, I picked up a book, The Amazing Quran, by Abdul Ahad, formerly Gary Miller. He became a Muslim, right? After the debating Ahmad Didat. And I would recommend, really, for someone who's got scientific knowledge and would like to have contemporary knowledge, you must read this book. It is absolutely fascinating. It's not more than 30, 40 pages, but it's absolutely fascinating. The Amazing Quran. So in there, yes. So in there, he's got this one amazing incident. He said, the people who are experts in embryology in Riyadh called a person by the name of Keith Moore from Toronto to come speak to them and relate to them what the Quran says about, embryology. Allah Ta'ala has made ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً فَخَلَقْنَا the 7 stages. I was in Qatar, 2 years or 3 years back, and outside the hospital, they got images of the 7 different stages. So I did a small clip that these are the 7 stages of development in the womb of the mother, which are in the Quran and has been depicted outside this hospital. So they brought him and they said, "This is what the Quran says." So he was absolutely amazed. He said, "How is it possible for someone 1400 years ago to know something which we all kids?" And he said one of the things that was absolutely amazing to him was the word alaqa, a leech-like clot. So when he read that, he said, "What does this mean?" So he went to the Department of Zoology. He took a picture of a leech, he put it on a screen, and then he also took a picture in the clinical trials with regard to embryology. How does that stage looks in the womb of the mother? And he found that there was very little, in fact it was the same. And then he came back to Canada and he started speaking about it. He said one person, it stunned the audience when he spoke about it, that the Quran has made mention of scientific facts that were revealed and known only recently, and they made mention about it many years ago. So he said one person, not wanting to accept the truth, said perhaps it was a primitive society, they were not very worried about human rights, etc. They must have chopped up the womb of a mother to be able to see it, and therefore they came to the conclusion that it is like a leech-like clot. And then he replied and he said, this can only be seen by a microscope, and there was no microscope in that time. So this is the aspect with regard to what I'm saying, that through the means of knowing medicine, etc., we come to know about many aspects with regard to Mufti Taqi. I said I'm going to only speak for half an hour and give some time for interaction. Mufti Taqi Usmani writes about his father. He said when his father came to Pakistan, he was made into a committee to look at the educational system for the new founded state. So he said we looked at three models. Right? We looked at three models. We looked at a purely deep institution where they came from, which is Deoban, or we looked at a purely university, which was the example of Aligarh University, or we looked at a model in which you took both, some aspects from here and some aspects from there. Right? And he said his father, Mufti Shafi Sahib Rahmatullah Alayhi, pleaded with the people of Pakistan, the new government of Pakistan, let us bring a system of education where we bring both of these and combine both of these elements into one. In many ways, it will be a manifestation of what happens in the Muslim schools in today's time. So we do both in one. And then he gave the example of two examples, Qayrawin, right? The curriculum in Qayrawin, which of course is in Tunisia, or Zaytuna and Qayrawin, those universities had people like Ibn Arabi Rahmatullah Alayhi, Ibn Rushd, teaching history, philosophy, deen in one institution. The same thing happens in Uzbekistan, where you go to the Registan, which is a very great tourist attraction in Samarkand, find in one square. Right? So he asked and he pleaded that let us do the new educational system in Pakistan in the newly founded state, right, which is now some 70, 80 years. I wonder what would have happened if they would have agreed with him. For some reason, we went into a dichotomy. The madrasas went into their own sphere, and the universities went into their own sphere. And we all know what the situation is. And I'm not giving a verdict with regard to whether it should have been like that, shouldn't have been like that. There's a reality, it became like that. It became a historical reality. But it is something that was very interesting, that the Grand Mufti of Pakistan at that time, universally acclaimed as such by the Pakistani people, he wanted a model of education which combines both the Dini sector and the universities. A foundational knowledge that is an individual obligation upon every Muslim was known to all the Muslims and was taught to all the peoples across the board. And I'm quoting Mufti Taqi Usmani. Can I just complete that, then we'll have other stuff. I just want to try and finish up. And then just to give an example with regard to Muslims. Now the one other aspect, let me just go quickly. One I have established from Islamic scholars the permissibility of acquiring contemporary subjects. Let me give you another example of Darul Uloom Deoban. Darul Uloom Deoban is regarded to be the pioneers of Maulana Qasim Nanotwi and Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi. So a person one day came after a lesson of Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi Rahmatullah Alayhi, and he asked him and he said that someone close to me has passed on. I want you to do Isal Thawab. Do something that to pass the reward of what you are doing to this deceased person of mine, my close relative. So he had just taught a lesson which we do in our syllabus, Qutbi, which is philosophy. He said, I give the reward of this lesson of philosophy to your deceased relative. So he was shocked. And he said that I would have expected you to give the reward of a lesson of Quran and Hadith. You're giving a reward. So Maulana made mention, if I teach philosophy with the right intention, then that is also rewarding. So the same thing, with regard to you teaching maths, science, you become someone who pioneers nuclear technology for the benefit of the ummah, that is also part of, not only part of deen, it is as rewarding. At that, Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi Rahmatullahi alayhi passed the reward of a lesson of philosophy. And of course, this I'm not going to go much into it, because I'm sure as people who are in education, everyone will know. 10 years in various sciences, Ibn Rushd in philosophy, Ibn Sina in medicine, Al-Qanun fi Tib of Ibn Sina Rahmatullahi alayhi was used by, and is still used by people as an encyclopedia with regard to medicine. I went to Granada twice, and there is a museum in which Al-Qaisis has used as surgical instruments to do the first cataract operation. And the instrument that he used differs very little from what they use in today's operation. So Muslims were in the forefront, pioneering. Ibn Battuta wrote his Ar-Rihla, and this comes from a man who traveled 75,000 miles, and he, of course, his travel books are very interesting to read. You can imagine how much of miles you would have acquired if there was a loyalty package at the time, loyalty program. Razi experimented, he did an experimentation on hygiene. He determined the best site to build a hospital. And of course, Encyclopedia Britannica made mention, and of course we all know Encyclopedia Britannica was the reference point before we came to Sheikh Google. So everyone used to look at the Encyclopedia Britannica. The most trustworthy statements on smallpox come from Razi of the 9th century. Ibn Khaldun, sociologist, philosopher, historiographer, father of many disciplines including social science. He wrote Kitab al-Ibar, and his Muqaddamah is in one great big volume. And Arnold Toynbee, the British historian, said, the greatest work created by any mind in any place or any time. Right? This was Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Haytham in astronomy, Al-Masudi in environment, Al-Idrisi in geography. Al-Idrisi is known to be the first person who did the first world map when he was asked to do it by the ruler of Sicily in present-day Italy. Ibn Firnas, a pioneer in aviation. And we can go on with making regard to 2/3 of the craters in the stars are known under Muslim astronomers. And the reason for that, Muslims were in the forefront of astronomy. So thereafter, there were known names of the craters. Afterwards, they used numerals to refer to the craters. But anyway, Muslims have been the pioneers, and it's so sad that we have lost out on that compared to where we were. And with great amount of prejudice and harm to the Muslim community and the Muslim Ummah. Really, I feel that in the last 200-300 years we have lagged behind, and because of that it has an impact with regard to the arms, with regard to the defense, with regard to many other aspects, with regard to technology. We are all the time dependent, and many times people will say, well, what's the use of pioneering something, and what's the use of creating something and being the inventor of something when you can use it for who has been done by someone irrespective? Well, you're going to use it in that manner, you are going to be disadvantaged. You are going to be under them. You are going to be disadvantaged and prejudiced. I just read somewhere that in certain instances, that even in the air, the airplanes that are sold to the Air Force, in certain instances, they can neutralize it when you need to use it against someone that is not regarded to be beneficial by the powers who have given you that Air Force planes. They can neutralize it. So if you are going to be dependent upon someone else for technology, you are going to be prejudiced. I'll just go in with regard to one of those aspects. Now this is a quote of Imam Ghazali Rahmatullah Ali in his Ihya. And I just want you to, and this is two more slides, this one here and the other one. Now, what is the basis of this slide? So Imam Ghazali Rahmatullah alayhi has complained that the people in his time, despite the fact that there is a need to acquire knowledge of medicine, the people don't want to acquire the knowledge of medicine because it is not so perspective compared to being a sheikh and an alim in his time. And he said the people don't want to become doctors because it is not as lucrative for being a sheikh, because as a sheikh, you are looking at awqafs, you are getting government positions, because that time Islam was the official religion of the state. So people don't want to. And he's complained about it, that despite the fact that there is a need to learn medicine and to learn, about medicine, people are not coming forward because it is not that lucrative. Today it is the exact opposite, So people want to become doctors because you get more money and you get more wealth compared to being an alim and a sheikh. But I found this to be very, very interesting. And of course there is, at the end of the day, the last thing is that we have to keep in mind that knowledge in Islam is a means towards an end. It's not an end in itself. At the end of the day, it's supposed to bring you closer towards Almighty Allah. I gave that example. And I'll conclude with this example of Maulana Abul Hassan Nadwi. Whatever knowledge we do, it's supposed to bring us the right intention, correct intention, humility. It must make us better human beings. It must bring us closer towards Almighty Allah. I mean, what's the use of knowledge that it doesn't bring you closer to Almighty Allah? It makes you proud, it makes you arrogant. Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, a person came from North Africa and he came to Medina Munawwara and he said, my community from North Africa, hearing about your fame, have asked me to come and ask you a matter on deen in which there is a dispute in our community. And he asked him the question and he looked down and he thought about it and he said, I don't know. So he said, what I'm going to tell the people? So go and tell them Imam Malik doesn't know the answer. This is the reality. You can't become, knowledge, true knowledge breeds humility. When a person through the means of his knowledge becomes arrogant, then you have to question the fact with regard to how knowledgeable is he in reality. So Abul Hassan Nadwi rahmatullah alayhi makes mention of this incident that a group of students went for a boat ride, and when they went for a boat ride, they started poking fun at the boat rider, and one of them said that, do you know mathematics? And he said, well, I don't know how much I must take money from you. More than that, I don't know much anything. I don't know any complex aspects with regard to maths. They said, well, quarter of your life is gone. And then afterwards they said, do you know history? And he said, well, the only history I know is maybe my father and my grandfather. Beyond that, I don't know anything else. That half your life is gone. Then they said, do you know geography? He said, no. And they continued laughing at him and said, 3/4 of your life is gone. And then afterwards, there was a wave that came, and it was now apparent that the boat is going to capsize and the boat is going to sink. And he asked them triumphantly in a way, do you know how to swim? And they said, no. They say, oh, your whole life is gone. The point I'm making is, if you got all this knowledge and you have not done things for the akhirat, if Allah Ta'ala were to ask you on the day of Qiyamah about your amal and you have not been able to do amal, then what is the use of all the beautiful degrees that you have had? So at the end of the day, I have made mention with regard to certain, requirements for knowledge. The aspect of intention, humility, knowing about the deen, and all of that is part and parcel of the aspect of contemporary knowledge, which if we do it in the correct intention, can be very rewarding by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Just wanted to add to Maulana Ibrahim's list. Al-Jazari is called the father of robotics. In the 12th century, he actually started engineering. So it just shows you that robotics and AI today started over Al-Jazari in the 12th century.
I've read quite a bit on that with regard to people saying that the algorithm, is it? Al-Jazari is the one who created the tools necessary which created what is today known as AI, etc. And there are many other aspects. And really, if you look at what the Muslims have done in the middle centuries and the House of Wisdom, and in Spain in particular, much of what has been, I'll give you an example, another example. Ibn Nafis was the first person to show the world the pulmonary circulation of the blood in the human body. Right? He was a pioneer with regard to it. In Western academia, it is referred to William Harvey, who came 300 years after Ibn Nafis. So Muslims were the pioneers, and of course people also speak about the Renaissance in Europe would not have been possible without the Muslim contribution in Spain. So these are things that, of course, the question that does arise, why did we lag behind? Is it a misunderstanding of religious texts? Or is it just because of lethargy? We became used to a comfortable, luxurious way of life, which could be the reality because that's how Muslims, when they came to the power. I mean, one of the reasons why Muslims declined in Spain was twofold. One was the disunity, and one was a luxurious way of living. If you go and see Madinatul Zahra, even today you become amazed with regard to the level of luxury that they had. Right? So we became, weak because of our luxurious way of living, and because of disunity, we were not focused, we did not take priorities, and it has happened whatever has happened, much to the detriment of the Muslim Ummah.
My question is linked to the decline of the Muslims in terms of thinking had a lot to do with the adoption of Greek philosophy, and Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, and all of these people, they deviated from the fundamentals of Islam. That's one aspect. And another aspect is that the ijtihad became stagnant, and the loss of Arabic language. So I feel that the situation we are in today, one of all these reasons are combined, that we lost our understanding of how to access knowledge, how to link that knowledge to our purpose of life, and how to link that knowledge to the entire ummah. Can you comment on this point, that it was taking on knowledge of philosophy that deviated us from the path we were on?
Yes, there is no doubt with regard to it that we have a purpose in life, and even the purpose with regard to technology or with regard to scientific knowledge has to become dependent upon our submission to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which I made mention several times. Now, the aspect of philosophy and Ibn Rushd, etc., is very interesting, because so Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi, I always use Imam Ghazali because I have studied a little bit of Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi. Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi's life is very amazing. So Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi was in the peak of his respect and honor in Baghdad. He was regarded to be the most sought after scholar for every matter, right, in Baghdad. And somehow he felt that there was a vacuum. I was not fulfilling what the aspect of knowledge for which I have acquired knowledge. So Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi went for 11 years in seclusion. No one knew where he was. Now can you imagine, at the height of your fame, you leave everything and you just go away for 11 years and without people knowing where you is. And then he felt that he would have continued in seclusion until he realized that there is a divine purpose for him to come back to do something. And one of the reasons he came was the philosophers, as you have made mention, had dominated. Now philosophy is something, maths for example, can be acquired without it being directly against any of the Quranic verses. Philosophy, etc., there are certain aspects with regard to it that comes into conflict with Islamic principles and Islamic teachings. So he came back and he wrote the Tahafatul Falasifa, the incoherence of the philosophers. And what he did was, he didn't, and it's very easy to refute something using Quranic verses and Quranic ayahs, and I'm not saying that you should not do that. But, when you take a philosophy and you show the incorrect nature of that philosophy from its own readings, that takes some skill, that takes some knowledge, and that's what Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi did. He wrote the incoherent philosophers, the incoherence of the philosophers. And when he did that, writing, he came back and he critiqued whatever people were in doing that time, whether it be the Sufis, whether it be the Fuqaha, whether it be the philosophers. And he related 4 groups of people, and he'd critique each and every one of them, and leading them to a path where you bring all the disciplines in accordance with the Quran and Hadith. And for 100 years after that, the philosophers suffered such a great blow that they never rose with regard to the incorrect beliefs that they had imposed upon the Muslim community. So yes, I would say there's a series of factors with regard to it. Could have been, not keeping up with the times, not keeping up with technology, maybe not, for example, using the Quran and Hadith as a basis of us, acquiring knowledge. Because if we had done so, we would have been able to acquire vistas of knowledge and oceans of knowledge and volumes of knowledge if we have been able to use, because the Quran tells us, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ, don't you reflect upon the Holy Quran, don't you reflect upon the signs of Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, سَنُرِيهِمْ فِي آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. We will show you signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the horizon and even in your own body. حَتَّى يَتَبَيْنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ, until you come to realize the truthfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the truthfulness of Islam. So it's a combination of issues that has led to the stagnation. And maybe inshallah al-Aziz, with the present scholars and emphasis upon the various disciplines, we might be able to reach that heights again, inshallah al-Aziz.
Just 1 minute, okay?
Thank you. You gave a very good example. Prophet ﷺ said, send 2 people to Syria to learn the modern war techniques. I have been thinking, if Prophet ﷺ were to be alive during the 40s and 50s, 1940s, I'm sure he would have, all the Muslim countries would have had a nuclear power by now, actually. Only few countries. What I'm trying to say is, we had a 6-day war in 1967. It's almost 60 years when the Arab countries kneeled down in front of US and Israel. Even after 60 years, they are still at the same level. So that's what I'm saying, that they are not advancing.
Can I just comment on that with your permission? Yeah. I mean, this is really important. We have so much knowledge. There are, how many doctors are there who are of Muslim origin working in Western institutes? How many engineers? We have abundant knowledge. I think coming here in GIS, we see just like one drop of it. The issue is political will. The issue is up here. The issue is Maulana said several times, we have to talk with caution. So I don't know. I try and understand what I'm trying to say. That, there is steps to take. There are things to do. There's bravery to show. We've got to connect to our Aqidah, our Quran, and we've got to figure out what is our actual action point right now. How do we deal with what is going on? Is the knowledge just for building schools? Is the knowledge just for me getting to Akhirah? The Quran tells us the purpose of the Ummah. We are Khairun Ummah. Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He has sent the messenger with the guidance and deen of truth so that it may prevail. The deen needs to prevail. Mankind needs to get this deen. People in the West are also suffering because of the secular knowledge, secular way of life. The number of suicides, the number of mental health problems. I've been speaking to many people who have come to me and said that Gaza has exposed a lot. Gaza has shown us that the world order has collapsed. World disorder, is collapsing, and there is, inshallah, Islam is on the horizon. But the issue is, we have to understand the purpose of the knowledge. We have to act upon it, inshallah.
For that, you just helped me with regard to it. But I think it needs political will, political courage, and many other reasons. I mean, many times we just become lethargic with regard to ready-made excuses. And there's no doubt whatsoever with regard to what the brother had said, that it's 1967 war, etc. It's a matter of political will, political courage, many other things. We have become dependent. And where do you start off from? When you start off something, to pioneer something is very difficult. I'll give you an example of Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu ta'ala. We all know that he was the wealthiest of the companions. Sometimes we don't realize to what extent Allah Ta'ala had granted him wealth. And when he came into Medina, and many times people say that, today we can't do anything because they have control over the market, they have control over the economy. We give a lot of excuses, right? But if there is a will, there is a way. So Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu ta'ala broke the stranglehold of the Jews of Medina, had an economic stranglehold over Medina. So he came, he realized it, he went into it, he tackled it, and he emerged from there as the strongest in terms of economic might, in terms of wealth. A Gulf magazine recently did a survey on the amount of wealth Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu did. They counted the amount of gold coins he left behind. They took the grams that were prevalent in the dinar of that time. Right? I think it was 4.3 grams. They counted the gold that was in the dananir, the dinars that he left behind. And they did a calculation on it. It worked out to $606 billion. Which was 7 times more than the present net worth of Bill Gates. So, and it is said about Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu ta'ala anhu that almost the entire Medina were dependent upon him. Some of them, he had given them loans with regard to, them fulfilling their needs or even doing business. Many of them he employed. Many of them, they were dependent upon him. He gave them charity. So a person in that time broke the stranglehold. And today, of course, but if there is the courage to be able to do it, it can be done. But of course, it will require a great amount of hard work. I remember a scholar recently making mention of something that I found quite interesting. He said, it took us a long time to get sick. If you were to consider that up till the 1900s, Muslims were dominant in politics, in military, in everything. Right? So almost 1300 years of Muslim history was one of dominance. We are the unfortunate generation that have seen the decline, and we have been under subjugation. Otherwise, for 90% of the history of Islam, we were the dominant force. Right? So it took us a long time to get sick. It might take us some time to heal. But of course, if we realize that we are sick and we realize that we need to heal, inshallah, steps can be taken in that direction.